Welcome to WealthRise Stories, where clarity meets knowledge, and knowledge becomes financial power.
Welcome to the WealthRise Stories channel. Today I want to take you deep into a story that, even though it unfolded more than a century ago, is still quietly shaping the world we live in. This isn't just history. This is a sharp mirror reflecting power manipulation and the unexpected force of truth. Have you ever wondered this? What would happen if a single company controlled the essential energy source of the entire world? Think about it. Not water, not food, energy. The thing that runs everything: cars, machines, factories, even the lamp you're using to read this or watch this video. Imagine the enormous power such an entity would hold. They could set prices however they wanted. They could decide who gets access and who doesn't. They could choke the economy of an entire nation with nothing more than a flick of the wrist. Sounds like a grim sci-fi movie about the future, doesn't it? But the truth is, this scenario has already happened. Not tomorrow, but more than 100 years ago. And it didn't happen in some parallel universe. It happened right here on our planet. Think about today's tech empires: Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple. They control our data, how we connect, how we shop. Their influence is so massive that sometimes it feels like we're living in their world. Have you ever felt powerless in the face of their authority? We're worried about what they might do with your personal information. Now multiply that feeling by 100 and shift from data to oil, the single most crucial energy source of that era. And that's where we meet one of the most powerful yet most mysterious figures in American economic history, John D. Rockefeller. He wasn't a flashy CEO appearing on every magazine cover the way Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos do today. Rockefeller was a shadow, a quiet, meticulous, cold architect who built an empire whose scale was almost unimaginable. He didn't need fiery speeches or provocative tweets. His strength lay in total silent control, step by step, over every corner of the oil industry. From crude oil wells underground to pipelines stretching thousands of miles, massive refineries, and even the kerosene lamps glowing in every household across America and beyond. His empire bore the name Standard Oil Company, a name that sounds simple, but behind it was a force strong enough to bend politicians' wills, shape laws, and influence the daily lives of millions in ways they never even realized. Standard Oil wasn't just a company. It was a living organism creeping into every nook and cranny of society with invisible but razor-sharp claws. It was a giant, towering, immovable, untouchable. And then standing up to this seemingly invincible giant was a woman. A woman with no political power, no vast fortune, no army or business empire behind her. Her name was Ida Tarbell. Her only weapon, a pen and an iron will. She was a journalist, an investigator, who spent years digging through countless documents, interviewing hundreds of witnesses, and facing threats from one of the most powerful corporations on the planet. She didn't flinch. Her goal wasn't to destroy a business. It was to expose the truth, a truth hidden beneath the polished sheen of success and power. This was an uneven battle in every literal sense. One side was an all-powerful oil empire. The other, a woman armed only with her pen. Imagine the loneliness, the pressure, and the danger Ida Tarbell faced when she began investigating the history of the Standard Oil Company, the book we're about to explore together. This investigation wasn't just a collection of articles or a historical account. It was a shockwave that rattled the foundation of modern capitalism. It was one of the strongest accusations ever made against monopoly power. How it distorts markets, harms consumers, and crushes the spirit of competition. It sparked a firestorm of public outrage, forced the government to take action, and ultimately changed the rules forever, reshaping how we think about corporate power and the government's role in regulating it. So what allowed a woman with nothing but a pen to confront a giant like John D. Rockefeller? How could one company amass such terrifying power, skirt the law, and manipulate an entire nation? And more importantly, what lessons can we draw from this story today, when modern tech giants wield resources and influence just as enormous? Come with me as we dive into this dramatic world where oil pipelines cross paths with printed pages, where truth stands face to face with ultimate power. A story not just about history, but about how we live, how we question, and how we demand transparency in a world forever shaped by invisible giants. In the previous part, we sketched the backdrop of one of the greatest and most controversial business stories in history: the rise of the Standard Oil Empire and the man who created it, John D. Rockefeller. If you've heard about it before, you can probably feel the atmosphere of a battle of an era in the middle of a massive transformation, right? Now we're stepping into the heart of the story, where we're not just recounting history, but peeling back the layers of psychology, morality, and timeless lessons. And to do that, we'll need a very special kind of guidebook. Oh, and get ready, because this chapter is not going to be some dry, dusty history lecture. The book I want to introduce to you now, and the backbone of this entire video, has a name that sounds, well, extremely academic. The History of the Standard Oil Company. Sounds like a thick dissertation, doesn't it? A pile of numbers, dates, events. Definitely not something you'd pick up with your Sunday morning coffee. But you know what? Don't let the title fool you. This isn't a typical history book. This is a criminal indictment written in blood and tears. It's a masterpiece of investigative journalism, an accusation so powerful that it completely reshaped how America viewed corporate power and antitrust law. It doesn't just record, it exposes, analyzes, and uncovers the darkest corners of wild, unrestrained capitalism. And the author of this indictment is none other than Ida Tarbell, a pioneering female journalist, a lighthouse shining into the deepest shadows of the American economy at the time. Picture this in the early 20th century, in a world where women were still fighting for the right to vote. Ida Tarbell not stood alone against the richest and most powerful man in the world. Her father had been part of the oil industry himself, and he was one of the thousands of small businesses crushed mercilessly by Rockefeller's Standard Oil. That is why her pen wasn't just sharp, it was soaked in emotion, in personal pain, and in outrage at injustice. So throughout this series, our perspective won't just stop at listing what happened. Oh no, we're going much deeper than that. We're going to dissect, first, the mind of a business genius, John D. Rockefeller. Who was he really? A financial sorcerer, a ruthless manipulator, or a visionary who saw the future of an industry and did whatever it took to make it real. We'll dive into his motivations, his chilling strategies, and the way he turned chaos into a massive wealth-producing machine. And more importantly, we'll ask, where is the line between brilliance and immorality? Second, we'll explore the extraordinary courage of a journalist, Ida Tarbell. What kind of force drove her to confront such a powerful empire, one that could silence any voice that dared to oppose it? How could a pen, a sharp mind, shake an entire economic foundation and even change a nation's laws? This is a story about the importance of truth, that the role of journalism in keeping power in check, and the price one pays for staying steadfast. And third, we'll confront the price of monopoly. That price isn't just money or giant profits concentrated in the hands of a few. That price is shattered lives, ruined towns, broken dreams, and the erosion of trust in a fair society. It's a story about the imbalance of power, its impact on ordinary lives, and the long-term consequences that still echo to this day. Do you notice anything familiar? Looking at our modern world with tech giants, global financial corporations, we're still wrestling with the same questions about monopoly, business ethics, and the boundaries of power. So I promise you, this won't just be a dry history lesson. This will be a dramatic, sometimes frightening, but incredibly important adventure. Together, we'll explore the dark side of the American dream, where limitless ambition can turn into cruelty, where the hunger for wealth can overshadow every moral value. We won't pass shallow judgment. We'll try to understand human nature, the complex motivations behind monumental decisions. We'll search for profound lessons about power business ethics, the role of the press, and more importantly, about our own nature when faced with the temptation of greatness and absolute control. Think of this as a map, a compass guiding us through the maze of history, psychology, and morality. This isn't just history. This is a handbook on power. A reminder that the stories of the past still echo and shape the world we live in today. So charge up your energy, steady your mind, and join me as we step into this labyrinth of power. Get ready for a journey that by the end of it will make you see the world in a very different way. We're about to open the very first pages of a legendary story, a story that shaped the modern world in ways few could have ever imagined. Together, we're about to explore the history of the Standard Oil Company, not just the history of a corporation, but an epic saga about the birth of the industrial age of power and of vision. And to begin this journey, join me as we step into Chapter 1, the dawn of the oil age. My friends, have you ever really thought about oil? That thick black liquid we take for granted, the backbone of everything from transportation, energy, plastics, to thousands of other products. But let's rewind time back to the mid-19th century, when oil was still a mystery, a filthy substance leaking from the earth, sometimes used as a folk remedy, but mostly dismissed as worthless. Then suddenly in 1859, in a tiny town called Titusville, Pennsylvania, a man named Edwin Drake did something that seemed absolutely insane. He drilled a well, not a water well, but an oil well. And when his pump burst with that thick black liquid, history turned a new page. 1. The Black Gold Rush madness. Hope and desperation. Picture this: the sound of excited shouting, the heavy stench of crude oil smoke, and mud blanketing everything. When news of Drake's discovery spread, it ignited a frenzy even more chaotic than the California gold rush before it. People swarmed into Pennsylvania like moths to a flame. Thirsty gamblers, farmers dreaming of a new life, and desperate men with nothing left to lose. Towns sprang up overnight. Within weeks, makeshift settlements transformed into overcrowded, chaotic cities. Titusville, Pithole, Oil Creek, these names became symbols of hope and insanity. Land was carved into tiny plots, each one a promise of unimaginable fortune. Thousands of wooden derricks rose like monsters, clawing at the sky, spewing black gold non-stop. You know, there were stories of farmers selling their barren land for a few $100s in the morning, only to watch the buyers strike a massive oil pocket by afternoon, instantly turning the land into $1 million treasure. There were stories of lucky men becoming rich overnight, building lavish mansions and tossing money out the window. But there were just as many who bet everything they had on a dry well and lost it all in a week. This was the Wild West, in every sense lawless, brutal, unforgiving. The strong devoured the weak. Oil prices swung wildly, sometimes up to $20 a barrel, then crashing to just 10 cents. Price chaos, lack of infrastructure, and massive overproduction kept the young industry constantly on the verge of collapse. It was a giant lottery where fortune arrived fast, but disappeared even faster. This was a world of chaos, broken dreams, and colossal fortunes. 2. John D. Rockefeller, the young meticulous accountant, with the razor-sharp vision. But within that madness, amid the cheers of the lucky and the cries of the ruined, stood a young man named John D. Rockefeller. He wasn't swept away by dreams of oil gushing from the ground. He wasn't chasing quick riches or big gambles. Rockefeller in his early 20s was a meticulous accountant in Cleveland, Ohio, far from the muddy oil fields of Pennsylvania. He was disciplined, organized, with astonishing long-term vision. While others rushed to dig wells, he sat counting numbers, analyzing financial statements, seeking stability. Rockefeller wasn't a gambler. He was a strategist. He wasn't looking for luck. He was looking for order. Even when friends and colleagues were tempted by the call of black gold, Rockefeller kept a cool head. He wasn't mesmerized by the sight of oil shooting out of the earth because he understood that raw crude was at first a nightmare, dirty, dangerous, and almost useless. To become valuable, it had to be tamed. And that's when Rockefeller's vision began to shine. He realized a simple truth most others missed in the frenzy. The money wasn't in finding oil, it was in controlling it. 3. The first strategic move. Why refining mattered more than drilling. You see, crude oil straight from the ground isn't something you can pour into a car engine or use to light a lamp. It's full of impurities, mud, water, volatile chemicals, and other harmful elements. To turn it into something valuable, it has to go through a complex process, refining. And while the whole world was drilling like crazy, Rockefeller focused on refineries. He understood the oil industry's real problem wasn't a lack of supply. In fact, there was too much crude oil causing wild price swings, but a lack of the ability to turn that supply into useful, consistent, marketable products. Before petroleum, people used whale oil for lighting expensive scarce. Kerosene, a refined product from crude oil, became a cheaper, more efficient alternative for lighting American homes. Rockefeller saw a massive bottleneck, a market hungry for refined products, but a chaotic crude supply and a disorganized, inefficient refining process. While drilling was a geological gamble, refining was an industry of discipline, science, and scale. It was less risky, more stable, and most importantly, controllable. Rockefeller didn't want to gamble on finding oil. He wanted to control the process of turning crude into liquid gold. He realized that by controlling refining, he could control cost, quality, and supply of the final product. This wasn't just a business decision, it was a philosophy. A shift from dig and hope to control and optimize. And while the wildcatters chased the next lucky well, John D. Rockefeller quietly and meticulously built the most modern, efficient refineries. He bought crude oil at dirt-cheap prices from small producers and turned it into high-quality, predictable kerosene that met the massive demand of the market. That vision laid the foundation for Standard Oil, an empire that didn't just dominate the oil industry, but reshaped the entire economy and society. The game had only just begun. From the chaos of those early days, a new order slowly emerged, guided by the steady hand of a man with extraordinary foresight. And this was only the beginning of the story of how an industry was born and how one man changed it forever. Don't miss Chapter 2. Where we'll explore how Rockefeller began building his empire step by step in a landscape of brutal competition and relentless challenges. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. If in Chapter 1 we explored the explosive rise of the oil industry and how the Standard Oil Company emerged like a mighty empire, then today we're diving deeper straight into the heart and mind of the man who built that empire, John D. Rockefeller. The title of this section will be Chapter 2. John D. Rockefeller. Genius or villain? Sounds dramatic, doesn't it? And trust me, Rockefeller's life is far more dramatic than any Hollywood movie. He's a man full of contradictions, a mosaic made of pieces so opposite. It's hard to believe they belong to the same person. A devout believer, a generous philanthropist, but at the same time, a ruthless, uncompromising business strategist. So who exactly was John D. Rockefeller? Let's peel back the layers of this complex man. Childhood stories and the life principles that shaped who he became. To understand the Rockefeller of Standard Oil, we have to rewind back to his childhood, to the first bricks that built his character and worldview. He was born in 1839 into a family whose parents were striking opposites. His mother, Eliza Davison Rockefeller, was devout, resilient, strict, and extremely frugal. She taught her children the value of labor punctuality, and most importantly instilled in young John the Baptist principle of giving a full tithe, 10% of his income, to the church and charity. This wasn't just advice. It was a command. John kept that rule his entire life, from the first pennies he earned to the day he became the richest man in the world. This idea of giving would become a recurring theme throughout his life. And what about his father? His father, William Avery Rockefeller, better known as Big Bill, was something else entirely. A wanderer, a traveling medicine salesman, usually fake medicine, a small-time con artist, and a man with many affairs. Big Bill was pragmatic, cunning, and sometimes downright ruthless. He even taught his son business lessons in his own peculiar way. He would pay John for chores, and then negotiate the price down afterward or demand interest on money John had borrowed. Big Bill taught his son, never let yourself be cheated, not even by your own father. Sounds harsh, doesn't it? But these lessons forged a John D. Rockefeller who was always on guard, always calculating, always seeking control. You see, John D. Rockefeller grew up between two extremes, the unwavering faith discipline and charity of his mother, and the cunning, cold pragmatism and constant search for advantage from his father. That strange combination created someone truly unique. Even as a boy, John showed unusual traits. At age 7, he raised and sold turkeys, keeping detailed ledgers for every transaction. Then came selling candy and even lending money to neighbors with modest interest. He recorded everything, every penny earned, every penny spent. That discipline, precision, and love for numbers appeared very early. At age 16, he got his first job as an assistant bookkeeper at Hewitt & Tuttle in Cleveland. It was September 26, 1855, a day he later called his Emancipation Day. He worked 10-12 hours a day, 6 days a week, with absolute dedication. Even when unpaid at first, he learned everything he could. And when he received his very first wages, he immediately tithed 10% to charity. These life principles, discipline, frugality, hard work giving, and vigilance, became the core of John D. Rockefeller. They shaped how he lived, how he did business, and even how he viewed the world. 2. Analyzing the business philosophy competition is a sin. Now let's move to the more villainous side, or at least what many people perceive as such. Rockefeller's business philosophy can be summed up in one highly controversial statement: competition is a sin. Sounds insane, right? In a society that worships free market capitalism and views competition as the engine of progress, Rockefeller's declaration seems completely backwards. But to him, it was a truth. Rockefeller didn't see competition as a healthy race. He saw it as wasteful, chaotic duplication. Picture the early oil days, hundreds, even thousands of tiny refineries, each doing their own thing, building their own plants, pipelines, wagons. It meant high costs, inconsistent quality, and constant instability. With his long-range vision and systemic thinking, Rockefeller believed the only way to achieve efficiency, stability, and affordable prices for consumers was through consolidation and control. He didn't want to win the competition, he wanted to eliminate it. He believed that if all refineries were united under one roof, Standard Oil, they could optimize processes, cut costs, and offer better products at lower prices for everyone. And to accomplish this philosophy, Rockefeller didn't hesitate to use some of the most ruthless, dirty tactics in business history. Rebate system. With massive shipping volumes, Standard Oil secretly secured deals with railroads, not only discounted rates for transporting its own oil, but also rebates on every competitor's barrel shipped on the same line. This created a cost advantage that was nearly unbeatable. Predatory pricing. If a competitor refused to sell, Rockefeller would slash prices in that local market so low that no one could survive, forcing them to surrender or go bankrupt. Acquisition and consolidation. He bought out refineries, sometimes through financial pressure, sometimes through irresistible offers. Those who accepted got shares in Standard Oil. Those who refused were crushed. Creation of trusts. To dodge early antitrust laws and maintain total control of the entire supply chain, drilling, refining, transportation, distribution, Rockefeller created the trust structure. Shareholders of various companies handed their stock to a group of trustees led by Rockefeller in exchange for trust certificates. A small group now controlled the entire industry. To Rockefeller, these actions weren't villainous. He believed he was bringing order to chaos, efficiency to waste, and light to the darkness of senseless competition. He saw himself as carrying out a sacred mission to rationalize a crucial industry, and in a way serving God by creating wealth and using it for good. Through the clash between his exemplary personal life and his dirty business tactics. And this is what makes Rockefeller one of the most controversial figures in history. How could someone live such a morally upright personal life while running a business empire built on such ruthless strategies? In his personal life, Rockefeller was almost flawless, a devoted husband and loving father. He married Laura Celestia Spellman, an intelligent, devout teacher. Their marriage was a model of loyalty and mutual support. He was loving, though sometimes strict, and taught his children the value of hard work and thrift. Deeply religious and ethical. A faithful Baptist, he attended church, regularly taught Sunday school, never drank, never smoked, and lived with extreme moderation. A monumental philanthropist beyond tithing, he became one of the most generous philanthropists in world history. By the end of his life, he had given away about $540 million, equivalent to hundreds of billions today, to found the University of Chicago, the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, and the Rockefeller Foundation, institutions that transformed global education, medicine, and science. He truly believed in the gospel of wealth, that the rich are obligated to use their fortune to improve society. And yet, this portrait stands in stark contrast to the image of the ruthless oil king, who crushed rivals, manipulated markets, and choked innovation. Ida Tarbell, the pioneering investigative journalist, painted a harsh, unforgiving portrait of Rockefeller and Standard Oil in The History of the Standard Oil Company, the very book we're discussing. She exposed the dirty trick schemes and monopolistic abuse that ignited public outrage and raised serious moral questions. So what's going on here? Did Rockefeller separate his personal and business lives? Or did he truly believe he was doing the right thing for society, even when it required ruthless actions in the marketplace? Perhaps the answer lies in his view of order. To Rockefeller, the chaos of free markets was unacceptable. He saw a world he could improve by imposing order, efficiency, and control. And if achieving that order meant eliminating chaos in the form of competition, it was a price he was willing to pay. He believed the noble ends, efficiency, low prices, stability, justified the means, monopoly tactics. He may have even believed he was doing God's work by creating wealth and then giving it away. So was John D. Rockefeller a genius or a villain? Perhaps he was both, or not fully either. He was a genius of organization strategy and big-picture thinking. He built an industrial empire unlike anything the world had ever seen, and then became one of history's greatest philanthropists, laying the foundation for modern scientific and educational advancement. But he was also a villain in the eyes of those he crushed and in the eyes of the public who saw his manipulation of markets and suppression of competition. His methods forever changed the rules of American business and forced the government to intervene to curb monopoly power. John D. Rockefeller is a reminder that the line between morality and ambition, between vision and ruthlessness, is often blurry and overlapping. He shows us that a single human being can hold both the noblest qualities and the darkest impulses at the same time. As we conclude Chapter 2, we now have a deeper understanding of John D. Rockefeller, a complex, contradictory, but enormously influential figure. In the upcoming Chapter 3, we'll explore what happened when Standard Oil's power reached its peak, and how the U.S. government reacted to this empire, leading to one of the most iconic antitrust cases in history. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss Chapter 3. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. If you've been following our journey through the history of the Standard Oil Company, you've probably noticed how often I emphasize the ruthlessness and long-term vision of John D. Rockefeller. But today, we're diving into what is perhaps the darkest Chapter 1 that, in my opinion, forever cemented Standard Oil's reputation as a monopolistic giant. Get ready, because we're heading into Chapter 3, the Cleveland Massacre and the Art of Takeover. This isn't just a business story, it's a story about survival morality and how far one man is willing to go to achieve his goals. Before we jump into the details, we need to place ourselves in Cleveland in the 1870s. This was a bustling refining hub, with more than 26 refineries of all sizes fiercely competing with one another. Rockefeller's Standard Oil was already a large visionary company by then, but it was not yet a monopoly. The market still had many independent players, and Rockefeller, with his strategic genius, saw the inefficiency in all this competition. He wanted order, he wanted control, and he found a way. The secret plot, the South Improvement Company. This is the heart of the massacre we're about to explore. The South Improvement Company sounds harmless, maybe even noble, doesn't it? But in reality, it was one of the most devious and effective schemes in the history of American business. The company didn't own a single refinery. It didn't produce anything at all. It was a ghost corporation created by Rockefeller and a few close allies. And here's how it worked. Rockefeller secretly negotiated with the three biggest railroads at the time, Pennsylvania Erie and New York Central. A three-party agreement was signed, and it would change the game forever. Under this agreement, the South Improvement Company, essentially Rockefeller's Standard Oil, would receive massive secret and utterly unfair shipping rebates, discounts no other refinery could ever access. Imagine this: you ship a barrel of oil and pay $1. But Standard Oil, through the South Improvement Company, pays only 40 cents. That difference alone created an absurd, unbeatable cost advantage. But that wasn't the worst part. Here comes the truly diabolical clause. The agreement included something called drawbacks, or reverse rebates. What did that mean? The railroads not only had to give Standard Oil huge discounts, they also had to pay Standard Oil a cut of the freight fees they collected from Standard Oil's competitors. Did you catch that? Every time a small Cleveland refinery paid the railroad to ship its oil, a portion of that money went straight into the pockets of Standard Oil, its biggest rival. It was like paying your enemy so he could keep crushing you. Absolutely brutal. When news of this deal slowly leaked out, and Rockefeller leaked it strategically at the perfect moment, it sent shockwaves of panic and fury through Cleveland's independent refiners. Suddenly, they realized that no matter how efficient they were, no matter how frugal or clever, they could never compete with Standard Oil. The game had been rigged blatantly and mercilessly. Emotional stories of the small business owners. And then, the Cleveland Massacre began. Rockefeller's plan wasn't just to create an unbeatable advantage. He wanted to use the panic to deliver the final blow. Picture the scene. Small refinery owners, men who had poured sweat, tears, and even blood into building their businesses from nothing, now facing a bleak future. They knew they couldn't survive. Their profits were being drained by unfair freight rates, and every barrel they shipped indirectly strengthened their enemy. And then their office door bursts open. A representative from Standard Oil, often Henry Flagler Rockefeller's right-hand man, walks in. They weren't there for long negotiations. They came with a single offer. Sell your company to Standard Oil, right now, at this price, or face total destruction. There was no room for bargaining. No room for drawn-out discussions. The offer was usually far below the company's true value, but it carried an unmistakable threat: refuse, and Standard Oil would crush you. They would cut your supply of crude. They would pressure the railroads to jack up your freight rates to unbearable levels. They would use their advantage to price your products into oblivion and drive you out of the market. Put yourself in these men's shoes. They had spent a lifetime building something meant to be a legacy. And now they had to choose between selling their life's work for pennies or watching it collapse entirely, taking their families and employees down with it. The fear, the helplessness, the sense of betrayal must have been overwhelming. I recall reading a story about a small refinery owner who built his business from scratch. When he signed the papers selling his company, he cried. Not because of the money, but because he was surrendering the dream of his life, watching it swallowed by a force he could never fight. Some resisted, tried to sue or plead for help. But with the speed and ruthlessness of Standard Oil's assault, they soon realized they were fighting a hopeless war. Within less than 6 weeks, 22 of the 26 competing refineries in Cleveland had been swallowed by Standard Oil. In just a few short weeks, this wasn't gradual consolidation. This was a blitzkrieg, a sudden, merciless sweep. Refineries were either absorbed or totally destroyed. The turning point that made Standard Oil unstoppable. The Cleveland Massacre wasn't just a tragic business episode. It was a watershed moment, a brutal test that permanently altered Standard Oil's trajectory. Before Cleveland, Standard Oil was already big. But after Cleveland, it became an unstoppable force, a true monopoly. Rockefeller didn't just eliminate his competitors. He sent a message to anyone thinking of resisting: you will be crushed. This wasn't business innovation or superior product quality. This was the art of takeover. Through coercion, rigging the system, stripping competitors of options, backing them into a corner until surrender was the only way out. Absorbing 22 refineries in weeks strengthened Standard Oil's dominance, allowing them to control a huge share of the nation's refining capacity. A domino effect followed. Standard Oil now had even greater power to negotiate with railroads, demand deeper discounts, and tighten its grip on the entire supply chain. Rockefeller and his supporters argued that this was necessary to bring order and efficiency to a chaotic, wasteful industry. He believed that consolidating refineries would reduce production costs and lower prices for consumers. And in a way, he was right. Kerosene prices did drop in the following years, but at what cost? The sacrifice of dozens of small businesses, the erosion of fair competition, the loss of business integrity. That is the price of monopoly power concentrated in the hands of a few, deciding the fate of thousands. The Cleveland Massacre is a chilling reminder of how absolute power can corrupt both people and systems. It was also a prophecy of what was to come. This was just the beginning. Rockefeller, emboldened by this swift and brutal victory, learned that control and takeover were the fastest paths to his ultimate goal: total domination of the oil market. After Cleveland, Standard Oil was no longer just a big competitor. It was Standard Oil, a synonym for power, immense wealth, and endless ethical controversy. And what Rockefeller did in Cleveland, he would repeat on a national scale. In the next chapter, we'll explore how Standard Oil expanded its empire far beyond Cleveland, in the lessons and tactics from this massacre, to seize control of every corner of America's oil industry. Welcome back to our journey into the world of the Standard Oil Empire, a story not just about oil, but about power manipulation and business minds so brilliant they were sometimes morally questionable. In the previous chapter, we saw how Rockefeller and his partners built a rock-solid foundation. But to transform a strong company into a monopolistic empire that controlled nearly an entire industry, they needed a secret weapon, an advantage no one else could replicate. And that weapon, none other than the National Railroad System. Chapter 4. Railroads. The lifeblood of an empire. You see, by the late 19th century, railroads weren't just a means of transportation. They were steel rivers running across the continent, carrying goods, people, and of course, oil. For an industry like refining, transportation costs were a massive burden. Crude oil had to travel from wells to refineries, and refined products had to be shipped across the nation to consumers. Whoever controlled the railroads controlled the lifeblood of the entire industry, and Standard Oil saw that more clearly than anyone. Rockefeller and his partners understood that no matter how efficient their refineries were, no matter how high the quality of their products, if their transportation costs were higher than their competitors, they would lose. So instead of accepting the existing rules of the game, they decided to rewrite them. Let's break down the two key concepts Standard Oil used to turn the railroads into their personal weapon: rebates and drawbacks. First is the rebate. Sounds harmless, right? Almost like a loyalty program. But for Standard Oil, it was a revolution in cost manipulation. Imagine this: you go to a supermarket, pay full price at the register. But later, the manager quietly slips you some cash back because you're a special customer, someone who buys in bulk or has a private arrangement. Meanwhile, everyone else still pays the full price. That's exactly how rebates worked. Standard Oil signed secret deals with major railroads. They would pay the published freight rate like everyone else. But afterward, the railroad would secretly refund Standard Oil a huge portion of that money, sometimes 25%, 30%, even 50%. In other words, while a small refinery paid $1 to ship a barrel of oil from Pennsylvania to New York, Standard Oil also paid $1 up front, but then received 30 cents back. Their real cost was only 70 cents. Do you see the difference? With one secret agreement, Standard Oil gained a massive transportation advantage. They could sell oil cheaper or keep prices the same and pocket larger profits. For competitors, this created an impossible wall. How do you compete with a company whose shipping costs are absurdly lower than yours? Even if your product is better, even if you manage your business well, you'll still be suffocated by this cost gap. But if rebates were a deadly strike, then drawbacks were the fatal blow: manipulation at an entirely different level. This is where Standard Oil's brilliance and moral bankruptcy showed most clearly. With drawback agreements, Standard Oil didn't just get rebates on its own shipments. It earned a commission on every shipment made by its competitors. Sounds insane, doesn't it? Let me make it clearer. It meant that every time a competitor shipped a barrel of oil by rail, part of the money they paid went straight into Standard Oil's bank account. Imagine you own a little refinery in Pennsylvania called Independent Oil Works. You've worked tirelessly, borrowed money, built your business from nothing. You pay $1 to ship a barrel of oil to New York. You think you're competing fairly. What you don't know is that out of that $1 you just paid 10 or 15 cents is being quietly transferred to Standard Oil. Think about the brutality of this strategy. Independent Oil Works is fighting day by day to survive. Every barrel they ship not only drains their cash, but directly finances their biggest enemy. Standard Oil not only avoids paying high freight rates, it actually makes money from every competitor's shipment. How can you compete? You are literally feeding your enemy, helping them grow stronger while you grow weaker. Competitors were forced either to raise prices and lose customers or sell at a loss until bankruptcy. Eventually, they had no choice but to sell their refineries to Standard Oil for peanuts or go under. Ida Tarbell's The history of the Standard Oil Company is filled with heartbreaking stories illustrating this brutality. She wrote about refiners in Titusville in Oil City who watched their businesses get drained of life little by little. For example, an independent refiner might pay 80 cents to ship a barrel from Oil City to New York. Meanwhile, Standard Oil, thanks to rebates and drawbacks, could ship the same barrel on the same route for 10 cents, or even earn 10 cents while doing so. When these independent owners went to the railroads to complain demanding fair rates, they got nothing but cold refusals. The railroads wouldn't dare risk upsetting Standard Oil. Standard Oil was their biggest customer, and the drawback deals made them money from the little guys. They were sharks, and Standard Oil was the giant whale no one dared to challenge. The result, independent refiners were trapped. They couldn't lower prices because shipping costs were too high. They couldn't raise prices because Standard Oil would undercut them instantly. In the end, they simply could not survive. To be fair, from a purely business standpoint, this strategy was genius. It revealed Rockefeller's unmatched clarity and ruthlessness. He didn't just see the potential of oil, he saw the potential of controlling the entire supply chain, especially transportation. By manipulating the railroads, Standard Oil created an unbreakable competitive moat, turning a national infrastructure meant to serve everyone fairly into a private monopoly weapon. But morally, this strategy was deeply unethical. It wasn't just cutthroat competition, it was systematic destruction. It suffocated innovation, crushed entrepreneurship, and deliberately annihilated smaller businesses. It distorted the entire market, turning fair play into a rigged game, serving only Standard Oil. When Ida Tarbell published these stories, the American public was shocked. People realized that Standard Oil's success didn't come purely from brilliance or efficiency, but from behind-the-scenes schemes, from hijacking public infrastructure to destroy rivals. These secret deals didn't just help Standard Oil dominate the oil market, they also allowed them to control the transportation lifeline itself. They weren't just an oil company, they became a force that controlled essential infrastructure. And this was only one of many tactics the empire used to solidify its power. But the story of Standard Oil doesn't end here. What other strategies did they use to strengthen their empire? And how did the public, and eventually the government, begin to push back against this relentless expansion? Find out in the next chapter, where we explore the first signs of resistance against the Standard Oil empire. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in this fascinating business history. See you in the next video. Welcome back to our journey through the history of the Standard Oil Company. In the previous chapter, we saw just how brutal John D. Rockefeller and his army could be in crushing rivals and slowly taking over America's young oil industry. From squeezing railroad rates to swallowing up small refineries, they built a gigantic empire with almost no meaningful competition. But how did he manage to do all of that legally, or at least hide its illegality from the eyes of the law and the public? How do you run dozens, even hundreds of subsidiary companies scattered across multiple states, when the law at the time hadn't even conceived of a true multi-state corporation? This is where we arrive at one of the most brilliant and, frankly, one of the most sinister legal inventions of the 19th century, the trust. And that brings us to today's chapter, Chapter 5, The Trust, the Invisible Octopus. To understand the trust, we need to step back for a moment. In the 1870s and 1880s, American companies were mostly independent legal entities created and governed by the laws of individual states. Want to do business in Ohio? Form an Ohio company. Want to work in Pennsylvania? Form another company in Pennsylvania. The idea of a parent company directly owning and managing dozens of subsidiaries across multiple states was legally complicated, almost impossible for the era. Especially as early antitrust laws were beginning to appear at the state level. Rockefeller and his lawyers faced a massive problem. How do you control the entire national oil industry without getting sued by state governments for monopoly? And more importantly, how do you hide who really owns what? This is when the genius, or more accurately, the cunning of Rockefeller and his legal team came into play. They created an entirely new structure, something no one had ever seen before the trust. Picture this. You're a small refinery owner who's been pushed into a corner by Standard Oil or already bought out. Instead of selling your company outright to Standard Oil Corporation, you do something else. You transfer, or more accurately entrust, your company's stock to a group of people known as trustees. And who are these trustees? John D. Rockefeller and his closest associates. In return, you receive trust certificates from the Standard Oil Trust. These certificates are no longer shares in your company. They're new financial instruments that entitle you to share in the profits of the entire Standard Oil Trust, meaning the profits of every company the trust controls. See how it works. At the center is the Central Board of Trustees, the brain. Surrounding them are dozens, eventually hundreds of subsidiaries, each legally separate, each operating under the laws of its state. But all are bound together, all controlled by one central mind, the trustees. Put simply, a trust is a legal agreement allowing a small group of people, the trustees, to hold and manage the stock of many different companies that appear independent on paper, but in reality serve one unified purpose under one centralized leadership. This allowed Standard Oil to control a vast empire without owning all its subsidiaries directly, at least not in a way the law could easily detect. And so the trust was born in 1882. Rockefeller and 8 of his associates became the first trustees. They held the stock of 40 companies, 26 in Ohio and 14 in other states, but effectively controlled more than 100 subsidiaries across the country. If I had to visualize the trust, I always picture a giant octopus. A massive black octopus hiding in the depths. Its body is the central governing brain, the powerful trustees. Its tentacles, they stretch everywhere, across the oil industry. One tentacle tightens around crude oil wells production. Another grips the entire railroad and pipeline system transportation. Another wraps around the major refineries processing. And the remaining tentacles extend into every storage facility, every kerosene store, every distribution market across America and even abroad. This octopus does not show its face. It doesn't parade its power with one single corporate name. Instead, it acts through countless subsidiary companies, benign-sounding, harmless-looking names like Standard Oil of New Jersey Vacuum Oil Company, Atlantic Refining Company. But they're all decoys. Behind every one of those names is the same invisible hand. It doesn't own everything directly, but it controls everything. It can suffocate a refinery in Cleveland, push kerosene prices sky high in New York, or drive crude oil prices down in Pennsylvania with just the slightest twitch of a tentacle. What's terrifying? The ambiguity, the lack of transparency. The public and even lawmakers had no way to tell who actually owned what. Smaller companies were swallowed without understanding why. Politicians trying to investigate didn't know where to begin because on paper everything looked legal and independent. Power was centralized, but responsibility was scattered and nearly impossible to trace. The impact of this structure on American law and the economy was enormous and far-reaching. Legally, the trust created a massive loophole. American law had never faced anything like it, a supercorporation that wasn't technically one company, but a network of companies ruled by a single board. Courts and legislators struggled to understand and confront it. It was the trust that ultimately inspired the creation of the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890, one of the most important economic laws in U.S. history, aimed at breaking apart monopolistic structures like the Standard Oil Trust. It was the government's effort to declare that no business should ever be so large, so powerful, that it could dominate an entire industry and harm the public interest. Economically, the trust completed Standard Oil's monopoly. It crushed competition, controlled prices, and accumulated staggering wealth for a tiny group of men. With near total control, Standard Oil could set prices however they pleased, often very high, hurting consumers. At the same time, they could force crude producers to sell at rock-bottom prices or go bankrupt. Put yourself in the shoes of a small refiner or farmer who needed kerosene to light his home. You had no choice. You bought from Standard Oil at Standard Oil's price. You felt powerless. I believe many Americans felt the same way. And when you feel powerless, you begin to get angry. You begin to ask questions. The legacy of the trust isn't just that it was eventually dismantled. Its legacy lies in how it reshaped the nation's thinking about corporate power monopoly and the role of government in regulating markets. It's a stark reminder that legal structures, even the most complex, can be built to serve purposes that are not exactly noble. Even though the trust no longer exists in its original form, its spirit, the idea of controlling many entities through one central structure, still lives on in modern business models, from holding companies to sprawling conglomerates. We still find ourselves asking, who really holds the power? Who really owns what? And how does that affect us? The trust was a masterpiece of legal manipulation, a testament to John D. Rockefeller's ingenuity and boundless ambition. It was the thick web of roots that fed and strengthened the Standard Oil octopus. So how did such a nearly invincible power structure finally meet resistance? Who dared to stand up to this colossal octopus, and what ultimately happened to it? That is the story we'll uncover in the next chapter. Today we're taking a turn, one that I believe will hit close to home for many of you. If up until now, we've been talking about Rockefeller as an unshakable giant, a mastermind who helped build the modern world, then today we meet a woman who was physically much smaller, but carried within her a blazing fire strong enough to scorch an entire empire. This is Chapter 6, Ida Tarbell, the flame of personal vengeance. Let's be honest with each other. Who among us has never felt something burning in our chest when faced with injustice? Who hasn't wished they could do something to right a wrong, especially when that wrong directly harmed someone they loved? And I believe that fire forged in childhood and fueled by outrage is what transformed Ida Tarbell from an ordinary girl into one of the greatest investigative journalists in American history. This wasn't just a job for her. This was a personal mission. Picture this: Pennsylvania, the 1860s. It was the era of the oil boom. A barren stretch of land suddenly roared to life like a giant beehive. The heavy smell of crude in the air, the groaning of pumps, the shouts of the lucky few who struck black gold. It was a world full of promise, where men with calloused hands could change their entire fate overnight. Ida Tarbell grew up right in the middle of that world. Her father, Franklin Tarbell, was a hard-working man, a small barrel maker. He crafted sturdy wooden barrels with his own hands to hold that precious black liquid. Her family wasn't wealthy, but they lived with dignity, with pride. Ida often sat and watched her father at work, sometimes even helping him. It was a simple childhood, but one filled with the texture of labor and the taste of freedom. But then a new force appeared, an enormous shadow that began to spread over those peaceful oil fields. That force was none other than Standard Oil, run by John D. Rockefeller. You remember everything we discussed about Rockefeller swallowing up his rivals, right? For Ida, this wasn't a newspaper story or a distant business scandal. This was reality, raw, brutal, unfolding right in front of her eyes, ripping into the life of her own family. Franklin Tarbell, once an independent craftsman with a small but honest business, suddenly became a victim. He was forced to sell his barrels for less than they cost to make, sometimes even at a loss, simply because Rockefeller and Standard Oil had already seized control of nearly the entire transport and refining system. Fear spread across the community. Ida watched neighbors, family, friends lose everything. She saw tired faces, hollow eyes, and heard quiet despair in the nights. She saw her father pacing sleeplessly, and her mother's face tightening with worry as they struggled just to keep food on the table. A child never forgets things like that. I believe those memories of injustice, of watching a giant crush the small and powerless, planted the first seeds of the fire inside Ida Tarbell. It left a deep scar, an unspoken vow whispered by a little girl to herself. One day she would uncover the truth, but Ida wasn't someone who would break under hardship. Fortunately, she received an education, something not all young women could dream of at the time. She chose the path of intellect. She sharpened herself. She graduated from Allegheny College, taught for a while, then turned to writing one step at a time. Her career eventually took her to the glittering streets of Paris, where she edited for a small magazine, immersing herself in culture and ideas, honing her writing and her instincts. Then, in 1894, a golden opportunity arrived. S.S. McClure, one of the most visionary magazine publishers in America, looked at Ida and didn't just see a talented writer. He saw a fiery heart and an extraordinary mind. He invited her to join McClure's magazine, the birthplace of modern investigative journalism. When McClure assigned her the Standard Oil story, Ida hesitated. Could she stay objective with all the pain of her past still burning under the surface? But then she understood. This wasn't just an assignment. This was her chance to fulfill that silent childhood promise. To bring the truth into the light, not through blind rage, but through irrefutable evidence. And so it began a nearly 5-year-long investigation. Imagine a woman spending half a decade relentlessly digging into one of the largest financial empires in the world. Ida Tarbell did exactly that. She read every financial report from the earliest days of Standard Oil to its most complex transactions. She traveled to archives across the country, interviewed hundreds of people, from former Standard Oil executives to victims of Rockefeller's tactics, to workers and the families connected to them. She hunted down confidential papers, private letters, unpublished meeting records, documents no one else had even thought to look for. No journalistic work had ever been prepared with such detail, such meticulousness, such patience. Her thoroughness bordered on obsession. She didn't just reveal what Rockefeller did. She exposed how he did it, down to the exact mechanisms of secret transport contracts, rebate deals, and predatory takeovers. And most importantly, her extraordinary courage. Going after John D. Rockefeller wasn't just taking on a billionaire. It meant taking on an entire system powerful enough to crush anyone who defied it. Threats came quietly. Pressure mounted from political circles, from financial elites. But Ida Tarbell never backed down. That flame of personal vengeance, tempered by intellect, discipline, and moral clarity, turned her into a steel wall no one could break. Why did Ida do all this? Why sacrifice her youth, her career, her peace to confront a seemingly invincible force? Because this wasn't just a story. It was the voice of the silenced. It was justice for the small businesses destroyed. It was dignity for her father and for thousands of other fathers who lost their livelihoods and pride under the fist of a monopoly. That personal fire wasn't destructive. It drove her to truth. It drove her to justice. And with her pen alone, she created one of the greatest investigative works in American history. One that forever changed how we think about power and accountability. So how did Ida Tarbell's work affect Standard Oil and Rockefeller? And was it truly the first shot that led to the fall of an empire? We'll find out in the next chapter. In the previous chapters, we explored the relentless and at times ruthless rise of John D. Rockefeller and the Standard Oil empire. We witnessed how a man with iron vision and unbreakable will reshaped an entire industry. But today we're not talking about building, we're talking about exposing. Join me as we dive into Chapter 7. The exposé, a chapter not only filled with tension and drama, but one that permanently changed the way America understands power and journalism. At the center of today's story is an extraordinary woman, Ida Tarbell. Picture the early 20th century. Standard Oil wasn't just a company, it was a giant, an all-encompassing force. It could sway markets, manipulate politics, and silence anyone who dared oppose it. Investigating Standard Oil at that time wasn't just difficult, it was a true David and Goliath battle. Except this time, David carried nothing but a pen and a razor-sharp mind. That David was Ida Tarbell. Tarbell wasn't a sensationalist reporter. She was a trained historian, a woman with almost supernatural patience and a fierce hunger for truth. Her investigation didn't last weeks or months. It was a grueling marathon that stretched across 6 long years, 1-1. A lonely journey, hunting for hidden documents and secret interviews. So where did Tarbell begin in a world with no internet, no Google, and where information was often buried under layers of dust or carefully hidden by those in power? She started where few people would think to look: public libraries, courthouse archives, old government reports, forgotten local newspapers. She dug through yellowed pages, dry legal documents, and seemingly lifeless business records. Like an archaeological detective, she painstakingly pieced together fragments of secret deals, monopoly agreements, mergers, and acquisitions pulled off quietly over decades. She uncovered complex organizational charts, ghost companies created solely to hide the true size of the empire. She found evidence that Standard Oil had received illegal railroad rebates, giving it a competitive advantage no rival could ever match. But documents alone could never tell the full story. To understand the heart and soul of this colossal scheme, she needed voices, confessions, testimonies, stories from people who had lived through Standard Oil's shadow. And this is where the story becomes dramatic. Imagine Ida Tarbell alone, traveling to small towns across Pennsylvania, where the oil industry once flourished before Standard Oil swallowed everything whole. She knocked on doors, searching for former employees, ruined competitors, angry suppliers, anyone who had ever brushed against Rockefeller's empire. These interviews were anything but easy. Fear was present in every glance, every word. Many refused to speak. They were terrified of consequences. Standard Oil had eyes and ears everywhere. A single slip, a single revealed detail could cost someone their job, their home, or even bring worse trouble. Tarbell often had to meet people in secret in dimly lit rooms, after work hours, in hidden cafes where whispers could be drowned out by clinking dishes. She listened to stories of brutal bankruptcy, of veiled threats, not always overt violence, but an invisible pressure. A reminder of Standard Oil's absolute power. If you talk, you'll never work in this industry again. And many were warned. Others heard vague hints about accidents that could happen. She had to build trust sometimes for weeks, sometimes months, just to get one person to speak. And when they did, they delivered explosive testimonies about Standard Oil's ruthless tactics, predatory pricing, government bribery, even sabotage of competitors' infrastructure. 2. An unexpected revelation. The role of Henry H. Rogers. And then a surprising character entered the picture, a missing puzzle piece that would reshape everything. Henry H. Rogers. Henry H. Rogers. A name almost unknown outside business circles, yet inside Standard Oil, he was a true powerhouse. One of its top directors, Rockefeller's right-hand man, and a chief architect of Standard Oil's most ruthless monopoly strategies. Sharp, cold, relentless in business, yet also a lover of art and high society. The shocking part, Rogers became one of Ida Tarbell's most important sources. But why? Why would one of Standard Oil's most powerful men willingly help the woman trying to expose his company? At first, Rogers' motive wasn't to help her. He knew Tarbell was writing about Standard Oil and wanted to correct what he believed were misunderstandings. He thought he could manipulate her, guide her narrative in a favorable direction, or at least justify the company's actions. He was confident in his eloquence and brilliance. Tarbell, intelligent and patient, didn't turn down the opportunity. She met with Rogers. Long lunches that stretched for hours, seemingly casual conversations that gradually opened the doors to deeper details. Rogers, confident and eager to showcase his knowledge, talked about Standard Oil strategies, internal structures, even Rockefeller's thoughts. He believed he was persuading her, pulling her to his side. But unknowingly, he became the key to her investigation. He handed her insights into Standard Oil's inner workings, exposed contradictions in the company's public statements, and confirmed suspicions she had gathered from other sources. He didn't directly give her secret documents, but his explanations, his offhand remarks, helped her decode the documents she already had. Rogers became the key that unlocked many of Standard Oil's most complex secrets. He didn't realize that every time he tried to justify a controversial decision, he was actually confirming its existence, and sometimes revealing how it happened. It's one of the most ironic and fascinating moments in investigative journalism history, proof that even the strongest walls crack from the inside, not through betrayal, but through arrogance. 3. Piecing together the puzzle of a giant conspiracy. With mountains of notes, interviews, documents, and the invaluable insights from Henry H. Rogers, Tarbell began assembling everything. This was a monumental task requiring not just persistence, but razor-sharp analytical skill. She organized thousands of data points, cross-checked testimonies, verified and re-verified documents. Small, scattered details merged into a crystal-clear overall picture, one that was truly terrifying. It wasn't just a big company. It was a sprawling network of secret deals, unfair competitive practices, ruthless takeovers, and an unrelenting effort to crush smaller rivals by any means necessary. She didn't just prove that Standard Oil was a monopoly, she showed exactly how it became one step by step through actions many considered immoral and illegal. Ida Tarbell accomplished what few even dared to imagine. She tore down the veil. She exposed the entire colossal scheme of Standard Oil to the world. Her work wasn't just a report, it was a detailed, evidence-packed indictment against one of the most powerful corporations on Earth. She didn't just write a book, she created a historic prosecution, a powerful voice for millions harmed by Standard Oil's monopoly. Her impact still echoes today, reminding us of the power of investigative journalism, the importance of truth, and the extraordinary courage of one individual willing to stand against giants. In the next chapter, we'll see how Standard Oil and John D. Rockefeller reacted to these earth-shattering revelations. And more importantly, we'll explore the long-lasting impact of Ida Tarbell's work on American economic and political history. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, and see you soon. I know many of you are still haunted by what we discussed in the previous chapters about Standard Oil and the nearly unshakable empire of John D. Rockefeller. An empire built on genius ruthlessness and, at times, sheer immorality. We've seen how they absorbed, controlled, and suffocated every competitor that dared to stand in their way. A fortress so solid it seemed nothing could break through. But in history, the greatest empires often don't fall because of war, but because of something far smaller, the pen. And in this case, the pen belonged to a woman named Ida Tarbell. Today we step into Chapter 8, the storm of public opinion and the fall of an empire. Let's witness the historic moment when truth, justice, and public pressure created an earthquake that swept away what once seemed immovable. Remember Ida Tarbell, the woman we talked about at the end of the previous chapter. She wasn't a politician, she wasn't a rival tycoon, she was just a journalist. But she was a journalist with a fearless heart, a razor-sharp mind, and a pen with the strength of 1,000 swords. Every month, when McClure's magazine released a new issue, it was like a bomb dropping right into the center of the Standard Oil empire. One article after another, she peeled back the layers of secrecy, exposing the dirty tricks, the schemes of domination, and the human lives that Standard Oil crushed on its way to absolute power. Listen to the sentences that shook America, sentences that even now send chills down my spine because of their sheer power. Tarbell didn't just tell a story. She woke the conscience of the nation. There is nothing in the business history of our country that shows more clearly the immorality and ruthless behavior with which Standard Oil has treated its smaller competitors. They strangled competition not through superior products, but through superior scheming and limitless brutality. And this one, in its pursuit of power, Standard Oil has not hesitated to break the most basic moral rules, distort the law, and trample on the rights of thousands of American citizens simply to achieve monopoly. Can you imagine? These words weren't just naked truths, they were a moral indictment. Tarbell wasn't simply talking business. She was talking about the betrayal of America's core values: fairness, equal opportunity, and a level playing field. When these articles were published, the whole country ignited. From small-town cafes to luxurious city parlors, everyone was reading, everyone was talking. Americans who had always believed in the dream of freedom and opportunity suddenly realized they had been deceived. They felt outraged, not just at Standard Oil's business tactics, but at the arrogance, the contempt for law and ethics that the company embodied. Public anger didn't stop at whispers. It turned into a roaring wave demanding justice and reform. Other newspapers joined in fanning the flames. Overnight, John D. Rockefeller, once a symbol of success, became the national villain, a giant octopus whose tentacles strangled the economy. And then came President Theodore Roosevelt, a man of action with a powerful will and a clear vision for America. At first, Roosevelt wasn't fond of the muckrakers like Tarbell. He once said they only looked down at the dirt instead of looking up at higher ideals. But Roosevelt was a brilliant politician. He understood the force of public opinion. When the pressure became impossible to ignore, and when Tarbell's evidence was overwhelming, he had no choice but to shift his position. Roosevelt realized that allowing monopolies like Standard Oil to continue running wild would threaten the foundations of American democracy and its economy. He didn't hate all big corporations. He believed some could be beneficial. But he was fiercely opposed to those that abused their power to crush competition and harm the public. He believed strongly in the distinction between good trusts and bad trusts. And Standard Oil, after Tarbell's exposé, was clearly a bad one. From initial criticism, Roosevelt moved into action. He became one of the greatest trustbusters in American history. His message was clear: no individual and no corporation is above the law. With the backing of the public and the determination of the presidency, the U.S. government was ready for a historic legal battle. What about Rockefeller, the man who created and commanded the empire? At first, he brushed it off. He dismissed Tarbell's accusations as fabrications, lies born from the personal grudge of a woman whose father had once been a small oil producer crushed by Standard Oil. Rockefeller believed he was doing the right thing, bringing efficiency and order to a chaotic industry. He believed in his destiny and God's will, but when her articles spread everywhere, when political cartoons depicted him as a greedy monster, when even schoolchildren mocked him. Rockefeller could no longer ignore it. His reputation, the thing he'd tried to polish through massive philanthropy, was now in ruins. He still believed he was right. But the public didn't. And public backlash is a force even John D. Rockefeller couldn't buy or control. Though he remained externally calm, the collapse of his public image surely cut deep. The pressure soon turned into concrete legal action. In 1906, the U.S. Department of Justice, under President Roosevelt's direction, filed suit against Standard Oil Company of New Jersey, accusing it of violating the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. This wasn't just any lawsuit. It was a 5-year legal war, thousands of pages of documents, hundreds of witnesses, fierce debates. Standard Oil brought in the best lawyers money could buy. But the truth Tarbell had revealed, and the will of the public represented by Roosevelt, were unstoppable. And then came May 15, 1911, a date forever etched into American economic and legal history. The U.S. Supreme Court delivered its final ruling, a historic decision. Standard Oil Company of New Jersey was guilty of violating the Sherman Act. But the ruling didn't stop there. The court ordered the entire corporation to be broken up into 34 independent companies. Imagine that this colossal empire, once controlled by a tiny inner circle, now forced to split apart into dozens of competing entities. The court applied the rule of reason, stating that not all big corporations were illegal, only those that unreasonably abused their monopoly power to restrict trade. Standard Oil, with all the damning behavior exposed, had clearly crossed that line. The greatest empire had fallen. Standard Oil, the symbol of dominance and control, now became history. Ironically, despite the breakup, Standard Oil's shareholders, including Rockefeller, actually became even wealthier, since the combined value of the 34 new companies often exceeded the value of the original corporation. But the monopoly power, the ability to strangle an entire market, was gone. The American oil industry was changed forever. This was a defining moment in American economic history. It proved the power of the pen and the power of truth and the power of public opinion when properly mobilized. It was a reminder that no empire, no matter how mighty, can stand if it is built on injustice and the abuse of power. The lessons from Ida Tarbell, from Theodore Roosevelt, and from John D. Rockefeller himself still resonate today. It is the eternal struggle between innovation and monopoly, between private gain and public good, between power and responsibility. And so, an empire has fallen, but the story doesn't end there. There are consequences, changes, and new lessons born from the ruins of Standard Oil. In the next chapter, we'll look at Rockefeller's legacy after the empire's collapse, and how he redefined the very meaning of philanthropy in America. In the previous chapter, we witnessed the historic moment when the United States Supreme Court handed down its ruling to break up the Standard Oil Company. A once invincible empire, seemingly immovable, finally collapsed under the weight of law and public opinion. But the story of Standard Oil and John D. Rockefeller does not end there. In fact, it only begins a new chapter. A chapter full of contradictions, conflicting truths, and questions that remain unanswered even today. This is Chapter 9, A Divided Legacy of Standard Oil and Rockefeller. When we talk about legacy, we often imagine a clean, continuous line of achievements or failures. But with Rockefeller, nothing is that simple. Like a diamond cut from countless angles, his legacy sparkles with the brilliant facets of innovation, efficiency, and extraordinary philanthropy. Yet, it also hides the darker edges of ruthless monopoly and the erosion of ethical business practices. We are going to peel back each layer. Part 1. The Phoenix Reborn. The Empire After the Fall. History is ironic. Sometimes a fatal blow becomes the catalyst for a new beginning. The 1911 breakup of Standard Oil did not destroy it. Instead, it unleashed a constellation of new entities, each one of them destined to become a giant in the global energy industry. We're talking about names you probably hear every day: ExxonMobil, Chevron, Amoco, Sohio, Conoco. These are just a handful of the more than 30 companies born from the dismantling of Standard Oil. At first, many feared the breakup would cause chaos and cripple the American oil industry. But reality proved the complete opposite. These saplings didn't just survive. They grew into towering new trees, in some cases more powerful and influential than the original mother tree. They competed with each other, of course, but they also inherited the entire foundation of engineering expertise, distribution systems, and that brutally efficient business philosophy Rockefeller created. Some historians even argue that the internal competition among Standard Oil's offspring drove decades of innovation and efficiency in the American oil industry. Exxon and Mobil, later merging into ExxonMobil and Chevron today, remain among the world's dominant energy corporations with massive market valuations and global influence. This proves an undeniable truth, no matter how controversial Rockefeller's methods were. The foundation he built for Standard Oil was astonishingly solid. It was a lean, unbelievably efficient machine capable of optimizing every stage from extraction to refining to transport and distribution. A legacy of efficiency and strategic vision that cannot be denied. Part 2. The Philanthropist Billionaire. A legacy of generosity. That's one side of the story, the survival and growth of the business empire. But what makes Rockefeller's legacy even more complex and fascinating is the other side, his role as one of the greatest philanthropists in human history. The image of Rockefeller sitting atop a mountain of money-crushing competitors often haunts our imagination. But the same man, after stepping away from direct business operations, transformed into a philanthropy titan with extraordinary vision and generosity. He believed that God gave me my money and that he had a responsibility to use it for good. And when I say good, I mean reshaping the global landscape of medicine and education. Let's highlight just a few achievements. Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, 1901. One of the world's pioneering biomedical research centers. It produced breakthroughs such as the yellow fever vaccine and foundational work in penicillin research. Millions, perhaps billions of lives have been saved thanks to discoveries made here. The University of Chicago, with Rockefeller's massive financial backing, it rapidly became a world-class academic center, producing Nobel laureates and transformative ideas. The General Education Board, 1902, focused on improving education in the American South, especially for African Americans, an unprecedented effort at the time. The Rockefeller Foundation, 1913, one of the most influential philanthropic organizations in the world. It funded major public health projects, agricultural development, and social science research globally. The foundation played a central role in eradicating hookworm disease in the American South and later internationally. Looking at this list, one can't help but ask, was this redemption an attempt to cleanse a troubled past, or simply a desire to leave a positive mark on humanity? Perhaps a bit of both. But whatever his motivations, Rockefeller's philanthropy transformed millions, if not billions, of lives. It was a vision far beyond personal gain, aiming to lift society as a whole. Part 3. The Moral Void. Scars that don't fade. But we cannot look only at the good and forget what happened. The price paid to accumulate the massive wealth that fueled that philanthropy remains a scar on business history. The image of Rockefeller perched atop a mountain of oil, strangling rivals, still lingers. We've talked about the tactics Standard Oil used: secret railroad rebates, predatory pricing to crush smaller competitors, and the creation of trusts to control the entire supply chain. These strategies, while brilliant from a business standpoint, set a dangerous precedent for unchecked monopoly. They distorted the free market, eliminated competition, and risked stalling innovation. They made it nearly impossible for small businesses with fresh ideas to survive. More importantly, they eroded trust. Trust in a fair playing field in ethical business conduct, in the American dream's promise that anyone can succeed with talent and hard work. For many Americans of that era, Rockefeller wasn't a brilliant businessman. He was a robber baron, someone who enriched himself by crushing others and manipulating the system. That sense of being unfairly squeezed out fueled a wave of public anger and became the driving force behind the birth of antitrust laws. Those moral wounds weren't just historical, they shaped modern economic regulation and our ongoing effort to balance corporate efficiency with market fairness. Part 4. The debate that never ends. Does the end justify the means? And so we return to the eternal question, one debated for more than a century. Does the end justify the means? On one hand, it's undeniable that Standard Oil delivered extraordinary efficiency. It transformed a crude, unstable product into an essential, affordable energy source, lighting homes, heating families, and powering an industrial revolution. Rockefeller was an architect of modernization. His massive philanthropy saved countless lives, raised global literacy, and opened doors for millions. But at what cost? At the cost of distorted competition, crushed small businesses, public distrust, and a long-lasting monopoly legacy. Can we separate the man from his methods? Can we praise Rockefeller the philanthropist while ignoring Rockefeller the monopolist? Or are both inseparable pieces of the same legacy? This is not a question with a black and white answer. And that's exactly what makes this story so powerful and thought-provoking. To me, it reminds us of the complexity of power and responsibility, that a single individual armed with extraordinary vision and ambition can be both a builder and a destroyer, a benefactor and a ruthless adversary. John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil are monuments to contradiction. They embody both the genius and the danger of unregulated capitalism, a reminder that greatness often comes with a price. Their legacy is not a simple tale of success or failure, but a complex case study in ethics, power, and the long-term impact of monumental business decisions. Whether you admire or condemn them, their legacy remains a powerful reminder of the transformative and potentially perilous force of extraordinary ambition. And I believe that is a lesson we still need to reflect on today. Thank you for listening to Chapter 9, A Divided Legacy. What do you think about Rockefeller's legacy? Does the end justify the means in this case? Leave your thoughts below. We'll discuss them together. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you won't miss the next captivating story. See you in the next chapter. Hello everyone. We've gone on a long journey together, walking through the dusty streets of 19th century Pennsylvania, stepping inside smoke-filled refineries, and witnessing the rise of an empire no one could have imagined: John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil. We've talked about strategy, ruthlessness, vision, and the inevitable downfall of a near-absolute power. After everything we've uncovered, you might be thinking, great and interesting historical story. But what does any of this have to do with me, with the world we live in today, in 2024? Don't put the book back on the shelf just yet, because the lessons Standard Oil left behind are anything but outdated. In fact, I'd argue they're more urgent today than ever. In this Chapter 10, I want us to ask a big question together. Are we living under a new trust without even realizing it? Chapter 10, Lessons for the 21st Century, From Oil to Data. Let's go back to Rockefeller for a moment. Imagine what he did with his ruthlessness and long-range vision. He didn't just own oil wells. He controlled everything: the pipelines, the refineries, the national distribution network. He used predatory pricing, bought out smaller rivals, and created a monopoly so dominant that no one could stand a chance. Rockefeller understood one truth better than anyone: whoever controls the infrastructure controls the future. Now look at the 21st century. What is our infrastructure today? It's the internet. It's data. And who controls these highways of information? Think about the names we encounter every day. Google, Amazon, Meta, Facebook. Google. Where do you search Google? What phone do you use? Android, built by Google. Where do you watch videos? YouTube, owned by Google. Sound familiar? A single company controls the world's main gateway to information, knowing what you want before you even finish typing it. They don't sell oil. They sell access to information and your attention to advertisers. They've bought hundreds of small tech companies, either to eliminate competition or to absorb new technology into their empire, just like Standard Oil swallowed up local refineries. Amazon. They sell you everything from toothbrushes to the massive servers powering your favorite websites, AWS. They control supply chains, logistics, and they even listen through their smart speakers. Amazon can offer prices so low that small retailers can't possibly compete. And if you're a seller on Amazon, you're completely dependent on their platform, a relationship Rockefeller himself would have admired. Meta, Facebook, and Meta. They control how we socialize. They bought Instagram and WhatsApp when they were tiny and turned them into their own sub-empires. You might choose not to use Facebook, but it's nearly impossible to fully escape Meta's reach when almost everyone you know is on one of their platforms. They don't just sell ads. They sell our connectivity, and in return they harvest our data. Data, the new oil. Why call data the new oil? Because it's just as valuable. It has to be extracted, refined, transported, and when processed correctly, it generates enormous wealth. It's the fuel of the digital economy. Every click, every like, every search, every check-in is a drop of precious crude. Big tech companies don't just sit on a giant oil field. They own the pipelines, the refineries, and the distribution network for this new kind of oil. They know who we are, what we want, what we fear, what we buy. And they use that information to shape the world around us. So here's the key question. Are we living under a new trust without realizing it? A trust without smokestacks or roaring refineries, but a digital web that seeps into every corner of our lives, controlling information transactions, even our social relationships. In this context, investigative journalism becomes more important than ever. We've talked so much about Ida Tarbell. She didn't carry a weapon. She carried a pen and relentless persistence. She spent years digging, interviewing hundreds of people, combing through thousands of confidential documents, confronting the most powerful men of her time to expose the truth about Standard Oil. Her work wasn't just journalism. It was a battle against secrecy, manipulation, and monopoly. Today, that mission is far more difficult. Tech giants don't just have armies of lawyers. They have media teams, information-shaping algorithms, and global networks that make breaking through harder than ever. They don't send threatening letters the way Rockefeller might have. Instead, they can quietly bury critical content in the algorithm or bankroll massive PR campaigns to steer public opinion. They are the gatekeepers of information, something even Standard Oil, with all its power, could never achieve. And that's exactly why Ida Tarbell's lessons still matter. Persistence. We need journalists, researchers, and individuals who aren't afraid to push back, to spend years uncovering the truth. Transparency. We must demand that companies be more transparent about how they operate and how they use our data. Public responsibility. Ultimately, we consumers, digital citizens, also carry responsibility. We cannot blindly hand over our data, our attention, our habits, without asking questions. Ask yourself, where does this come from? Who benefits? What am I trading away for this convenience? The battle against Standard Oil wasn't just about breaking up a company. It was a fight for the fundamental principles of a fair society, healthy competition, transparent information, and accountability for those in power. In the 21st century, with data as the oil and the internet as the pipeline, we must be more vigilant than ever. The story of Standard Oil is not just a chapter in history. It is a living warning about the dangers of unchecked power, the necessity of oversight, and the enduring strength of a pen that dares to speak the truth. I truly believe that if Ida Tarbell were alive today, she would not sit quietly. She would pick up her pen again, and her sharp eyes would be fixed directly on the tech giants, ready once more to uncover the truth for the public. Thank you for listening. See you in the next chapter, where we'll explore the lingering legacy of Standard Oil and how its story continues to shape our world, whether you realize it or not. After diving deep into the story of Standard Oil and the steel-hard spirit of Ida Tarbell, you might be wondering, how can we ordinary people living in the 21st century apply that Ida Tarbell mindset to our everyday lives? How do we not just read history, but turn its lessons into a compass for our own wisdom? That's exactly why I created this 7-day action plan training your Ida Tarbell-style critical thinking. This isn't an academic exercise. It's a series of small practical actions you can take right now to become a more informed, intentional, and responsible consumer and citizen. Think of this as a personal adventure one that helps you open your eyes and look deeper into the world around you. Days 1-2. Explore and support. Feel the heartbeat of your community. Ida Tarbell didn't begin her investigation by aiming straight at John D. Rockefeller. She started by understanding how Standard Oil affected ordinary people, small businesses, and entire communities. She took time to see the big picture starting at the local level. So your first challenge is this: learn about one small local business in your area and consider supporting them instead of a big chain. Why local businesses? Because these are your neighbors. Their stories are closer, more personal, and easier to understand. You can see their impact on the community in a way you'll never see with a multinational corporation. How to do it? Pick an independent coffee shop, a small bakery, a used bookstore, or a tiny grocery store you usually walk past without thinking. Spend a little time visiting them. Talk to the owner if possible. Ask about their story, their struggles, their joys. Learn where their products come from. Do they use local ingredients? And if you can buy something, anything. It doesn't have to be expensive. Just a conscious act of support. This action helps you strengthen your ability to observe, ask questions, and connect with your community at a deeper level. It's the first step towards seeing beyond glossy ads and corporate promises. Days 3-4. Read and analyze. Wake up the detective inside you. Ida Tarbell didn't rely on sensational headlines. She spent years gathering documents, reading thousands of pages of court transcripts and letters, and interviewing countless people to write the history of the Standard Oil Company. She was a master of long-form investigative journalism. Your challenge for these 2 days is read a long-form investigative article from a reputable source and analyze the techniques they used. Why long-form investigative journalism? Because in the age of fast food news and clickbait headlines, in-depth reporting is a powerful antidote. It forces us to slow down, think, and see an issue from multiple angles. How to do it? Choose a reputable, investigative news source. ProPublica, the New York Times, The Guardian, BBC Investigations, or trusted Vietnamese outlets like VN Express, Toi Tre Thang Nguyen. Pick an article that interests you or ties to a social issue you care about. As you read, ask yourself, who is the journalist? Are they credible? Do they have biases? What evidence do they use? Public records, first-hand interviews? Data. Are the sources solid? What investigative methods appear here? Interviews, data analysis, accessing confidential materials, direct observation. What perspectives are missing? Did the subject of the investigation get a chance to respond? Write down your thoughts. This will sharpen your critical thinking and your ability to evaluate information. Days 5 to 6. Check and protect who's controlling you. If Ida Tarbell lived today, I'm certain she wouldn't just investigate oil giants, she'd dive headfirst into big tech and how they collect and use our data. In the digital era, personal data is the new black gold. Your challenge: review the privacy settings on your most used social media accounts or apps and learn how your data is being used. Why is this important? Because the way your data is collected shapes everything from the ads you see to the news you consume, to how algorithms influence your worldview. Just like Standard Oil once manipulated oil prices, big tech can shape your online reality. How to do it? Pick your most used social network: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Zalo, etc. Or an app you've given a lot of personal information to. Go to Settings of Privacy, Your Data. Check who can see your posts and who can contact you. Pay extra attention to data shared with third parties and ad personalization. Skim. I know it's long, the terms of service or privacy policy, to get a basic sense of how your data is collected and shared. Look for keywords like data sharing, third parties, personalized ads. Adjust your privacy settings so you feel safer and more in control. I used to ignore all this too until I realized I had been giving away far more than I knew. This step doesn't just protect you. It helps you understand how one of today's most powerful industries works. Day 7. Share and discuss. Spark the flow of knowledge. Ida Tarbell's work didn't stay on the page. It sparked a national conversation, pushed lawmakers to act, and changed how the public viewed large corporations. She transformed knowledge into collective action. Your final challenge: share an insight or lesson you learned this week with a friend, family member, or colleague. Why share knowledge becomes powerful when it spreads. Sharing strengthens your understanding, invites new perspectives, and may inspire someone else to start their own journey of inquiry. How to do it? Choose someone you feel comfortable talking to. Tell them about the local business you explored, or a detail you discovered in the investigative article, or how surprised you were when you checked your privacy settings. The goal isn't to lecture, it's to start a conversation. Listen to their ideas too. They might have experiences or views you've never considered. You can ask, "Have you ever thought about this?" or "What would you do if you knew this?" This 7-day plan may seem simple, but each small step helps you strengthen your critical thinking muscles. It helps you become a wiser consumer, a more responsible citizen, someone who carries within them the persistence, sharpness, and courage to question the world, just like Ida Tarbell. Challenge yourself and let me know how it goes in the comments. What did you learn? Did anything surprise you? I can't wait to hear your stories. See you in the next video. We've just traveled a long road together, exploring the hidden corners and contrasting shades of one of the most explosive stories of business and power in history. The history of the Standard Oil Company. From the genius of John D. Rockefeller to the shadowy depths of monopoly, and then to the powerful voice of justice and truth. And now, my friends, this is the part I believe you'll want to hold on to the most from everything we've uncovered. If there are 3 things I want you to take with you, 3 gems of wisdom, this classic book gives us not just about the past, but about the world we live in today, then they are these 3 core lessons. Let's distill them together. The first lesson, and the one I think has been proven again and again throughout human history, especially through the story of Standard Oil, is this: 1. Absolute power leads to absolute corruption. Monopolies in any form are a threat to freedom and fairness. Narrator. Look at Standard Oil under Rockefeller. In the beginning, sure, they brought efficiency and stability to the market. But once power becomes too concentrated, once there's no real competition left, human nature, and the nature of power begins to reveal its darker sides. Standard Oil used every method imaginable, squeezing transportation rates, crushing competitors without mercy, controlling supply, even manipulating politics. They turned economic freedom into authoritarian control and fair competition into ruthless domination. This teaches us a profound truth: monopoly, economic, informational, or political, is always a hidden danger. It doesn't just stifle innovation, it steals consumer choice, weakens liberty, and ultimately erodes the foundation of social fairness. When one entity holds too much power, they don't just control markets, they can distort laws, influence public opinion, and shape the lives of millions according to their own will. To be honest, every time I think about this, I feel an urgent warning. We must always stay vigilant against any form of concentrated power, no matter how beneficial it may seem in the short term, because history has proven that the long-term cost is always far too high. The second lesson, to me, carries a romantic kind of beauty, but also tremendous strength. 2. The power of truth. One individual committed to the truth can challenge even the mightiest forces. Narrator. In the Standard Oil story, who dared to take on this giant empire? Not a government, not an army, but a woman, Ida Tarbell. She didn't carry a weapon. She didn't command troops. She carried a pen and an unshakable belief in the truth. Through painstaking investigation, relentless interviews, and extraordinary perseverance, she exposed the shady practices and monopolistic tactics of Standard Oil. And it was that pen, those articles, that ignited the nationwide antitrust movement, awakened the conscience of the American public, and placed unstoppable pressure on the government, ultimately leading to the downfall of a seemingly invincible empire. This teaches us that no matter how small you think you are, no matter how enormous the opposition may be, truth has an inherent power like no other. It can be buried, distorted, or forgotten for a time, but it can never be destroyed. And when just one person is brave enough, persistent enough to seek it, defend it, and spread it, that person can spark change beyond imagination. To me, this is endlessly inspiring. It reminds us of our responsibility to always seek truth, to speak up for what's right, and to never underestimate the power of a story told truthfully and courageously. Even in today's world of fake news and digital illusions, truth remains the firmest foundation we have. And finally, the third lesson, and the one I want you to reflect on most deeply as we look at our modern world, is this. 3. History always repeats itself. The battle against monopoly didn't end with Standard Oil. It's alive and ongoing with the giants of our era. Narrator, do you see it? More than a century has passed since Standard Oil was broken up, yet the core issues of power and monopoly are still here, just wearing new costumes. Yesterday, it was oil and railroads. Today, it's data algorithms, social networks, e-commerce, artificial intelligence. New names, new technologies, but the same underlying pattern of power concentration. Are we allowing today's tech giants and global corporations to accumulate so much power that they can control the information we access, manipulate the markets we depend on, even shape society according to their own interests, just like Standard Oil did to the oil industry? Are we repeating the same mistake, staying complacent until the monopoly becomes too strong to challenge? The antitrust battle isn't just a chapter in a history book. It is an ongoing struggle, one that demands vigilance and participation from all of us. As consumers, we need to understand our power and question where our products come from and how our data is being used. As citizens, we must support policies that encourage fair competition, protect freedom of innovation, and prevent excessive concentration of power. Look at what happened with Standard Oil, not just as a fairy tale from the past, but as a warning, a roadmap for the challenges we're facing now and will face in the future. History doesn't just recount what happened. It reflects what will happen if we fail to learn from our mistakes. And there you have it. These three lessons, the corruption of absolute power, the strength of truth, and the cyclical nature of history, are not just about Standard Oil. They're about human nature, about society, and about the choices we face every single day. Keep them in your mind, not just as interesting facts, but as guiding compasses for your thinking and your actions in today's world. And that is the story, or rather, a huge slice of history of Standard Oil. A story full of drama complexity, and I believe an incredible amount of resonance. We've turned each page together from Rockefeller's boundless ambition, those razor-sharp strategies, to the rise of empires, and the relentless efforts to expose the truth from people like Ida Tarbell. But what I always want you to take with you after every video on this channel isn't just dry facts about events long gone. It's the connection. Because even more than a century later, the lessons of Standard Oil, the questions of power competition, business ethics, and society's role in keeping giants in check remain fully intact. Don't you see, history isn't some dusty closed book. It's a mirror reflecting the present and even the future. And now is the moment when I want to ask you directly, who will you be in this story? You're not just a passive viewer. You're part of this conversation, a voice that matters. And I genuinely want to hear you. First, leave a comment right below this video. Which modern company do you see as today's version of Standard Oil? Take a moment to think about it. Could it be a tech giant dominating the app market, owning billions of users, and constantly swallowing smaller competitors? Or an energy conglomerate shaping global oil prices with influence that stretches across borders? Maybe an online retail empire absorbing every corner of e-commerce, pushing traditional stores into survival mode. Or perhaps a corporation in finance, pharmaceuticals, or media that reminds you of the old Standard Oil playbook. Share your perspective. There is no absolute right or wrong answer here. Only a spectrum of viewpoints we can learn from together. I believe each of us carries our own observations, our own experiences, and that's exactly how we decode this complicated world, how we see whether history is repeating or reinventing itself in our time. I'll read all your comments, and I'm excited to join that discussion with you. Second, if you believe in the power of independent journalism and in its irreplaceable role in holding power accountable, if you appreciate the tireless work of courageous journalists like Ida Tarbell, those who dared to stand up, dig deep, uncover the truth, and shine light into the hidden corners of power, then hit the like button for this video. Your single click isn't just support for the content we put our heart into. It's also your affirmation of the essential role honest information and deep analysis play in a democratic society. It's how we collectively cheer for voices that dare to tell the truth, that dare to question the obvious. And of course, to make sure you don't miss any world-shaping stories we'll explore next. From the business empires that shaped our economy, to extraordinary historical figures, to seemingly small events that created massive ripples, hit the subscribe button to our channel right now. Turn on the notification bell so YouTube can let you know whenever a new video is up. We are building a community of people hungry for knowledge, hungry for deeper understanding of the world around us, and I sincerely hope you'll become an essential part of that community. Your support is the greatest motivation for us to keep creating meaningful, high-quality content. Maybe you have a friend who's passionate about business, about how big corporations operate and influence our lives. Maybe you know someone who loves history, who wants to look deeper into the past stories that might just change the way they see the world. Or simply anyone who wants to better understand the world we're living in, how power is created, maintained, and sometimes challenged by truth and justice. A small link you share could open up a whole horizon of knowledge for someone else and help our channel reach more viewers, so stories like this can spread farther, inspiring more people to think, reflect, and learn. Thank you for spending your precious time listening and engaging. Remember, every comment, every like, every subscription, every share isn't just support for this channel. It's a sign that you are choosing to become an active part of the flow of information, knowledge, and understanding. You are writing your own role in the great story of our times. See you in the next stories. Goodbye for now.